is take a look at our question and so that we can remember, because I don't know if you guys are watching this all in a row. I don't know if you're watching 2 minutes and then not watching the rest. I'm here to help you try to break down these DBQs. If you already know how to do that, you can move on to something else. If not, it's a good thing to, practice. Okay? So here's our question. Historical context. During times of national crisis, United States presidents have made controversial decisions affecting civil liberties. 3 such decisions were Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus, Franklin D. Roosevelt's executive order to relocate Japanese Americans. We've already done those 2. And the third one is George W. Bush's signing of the U.S. Patriot Act. So your task, to remind you, is you're going to choose 2 of the presidential decisions affecting civil liberties listed in the historical context. And for each one of those 2, you are going to describe the historical circumstances that led to the decision. And you're going to discuss an argument in favor of and an argument of those opposed to the presidential decision. Okay? All right, so let's go to on 7, I believe. Yep, 7 starts George W. Bush. They try to put these in, just like they do with the regular exam, like with all the questions on the exam. They try to put them in a rough chronological order. DBQs, I've seen them go back and forth. This one is right in order. Okay, so I'm hoping they do this with you so you don't get confused. But honestly, I've had kids go through this, and I've given them documents and they can do them in whatever order they want when we're practicing in our class. And I've seen them label them. So if it was Abraham Lincoln, FDR, and George Bush, right? They would go, oh, document 7, who's it about? Here's my source. Look, President George W. Bush. So they would put a B next to it so they remembered that it was about Bush. Okay? So let's take a look. What do we do first? Read the question first. Anytime they give you a block of text, they give you a blurb, they give you a cartoon, they give you a map, always read your question first. Why did President George W. Bush call for the strengthening of law enforcement programs in 2001? You guys are probably right at the right age where you remember this stuff quite vividly. Or maybe not. I was teaching some kids last year that were born right around this time, which makes me feel really old. Okay, so why did he call for strengthening of law enforcement programs in 2001? Think in your back of your mind there. What's going on in 2001? What happened? Here is our source. We're going to circle our source every single time. The source is President George W. Bush address before the joint session of Congress, September 20th, 2001. Okay, so it is a primary source. It came right from George W. Bush. Okay, or it's a transcript of what he said. Okay, direct transcript. Okay, on September 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Americans have known wars, but for the past 136 years, they have been fought on foreign soil, except for one Sunday in 1941. Americans have known the casualties of war, but not at the center of a great city on a peaceful morning. Think about it. What is he talking about? On September 11th, 9/11, 2001. Okay, hopefully you're getting New York City. Hopefully you're getting Twin Towers. Okay, you need to think about this stuff as you're reading. Okay, 9/11, act of war against our country. Americans don't casualty of wars and not the center of a great city on a peaceful morning. Americans have known surprise attacks, but never before on thousands of civilians. All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Ooh, I don't know why that moved like that, but okay. Let's try it again. Okay. Tonight we face new and sudden national challenges. We will come together to improve air safety, to dramatically expand the number of air marshals on domestic flights. An air marshal is like a undercover police guy who is always on your flight, and you don't know who he is. And take new measures to prevent hijacking. We will come together to promote stability and keep our airlines flying with direct assistance during this emergency. We will come together to give law enforcement the additional tool it needs to track down terror here at home. We will come together to strengthen our intelligence capabilities, to know the plans of terrorists before they act, and to find them before they strike. Okay, so you have a vague idea, or hopefully a more specific idea, I'm hoping, of what was going on. 9/11, Twin Towers, New York City, 2001, George W. Bush. Okay, this was on September 20th. Okay, the attack happened on September 11th. This is from September 20th, 2001. Okay, why did President George Bush call for a strengthening of law enforcement programs in 2001? You can cite your text directly if you wish. Okay, you can say enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Okay. Okay, or you can just explain what happened, as long as it has something to do with what we're talking about here. So, why did George W. Bush call for a strengthening of law enforcement programs in 2001? The attack on the Twin Towers. I'm not going to capitalize that because they weren't actually called the Twin Towers. On 9/11/01, 2001. It's like a really long time ago now. Okay. So, like I said, you can cite what it says here. On September 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Okay? You can write that if you want. Okay? You don't have to write what I write. This is just practice. Okay? If you want to pick out what you think sounds better, or if you think something else sounds better than what I wrote, write it down. Okay? Okay. That was document 7. Now we're on to document 8. If I was, I don't even know what that is. Auto hide. Yay. We're on to document 8. If I was going through this and they weren't in order, I would put a B next to this for Bush. Okay? Because that's who we're talking about, President Bush. What are we doing? What do we always do first? We always read our question first. Okay? This one has two questions, rather. It's document 8. It gives you a blurb of text, and then it asks you 2 questions about this one blurb of text, okay? According to Congressman Lamar Smith, what was the purpose of the USA Patriot Act? I always call it the U.S. Patriot Act. Apparently it was the USA Patriot Act, okay? According to Congressman Lamar Smith, what was the purpose of the USA Patriot Act? And our question 2, in 2004, what was one reason Congressman Lamar Smith believed that the USA Patriot Act had been successful? So this is 3 years after it was put into effect. Okay, so we're going to circle our source. Congressman Lamar Smith, the Patriot Act protects Americans, April 23rd, 2004. Okay, so what do we have here? let's look at our question again. What was the purpose of the USA Patriot Act? We're going to look for that first, okay? Congress passed the Patriot Act just weeks after the September 11th attacks by overwhelming margins in the House and Senate. In the House, the vote was 357 to 66, and the Senate 98 to 1. Many of the tools the Act provides to law enforcement to fight terrorism have been used for decades to fight organized crime and drug dealers, and have been reviewed and approved by the courts. The Patriot Act largely applies current law to the crimes of terrorism, including the use of chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction, killing Americans abroad, and financing terrorist activities. There have been reports in the media that about the Patriot Act, and how it will affect our civil liberties. In many cases, there are grave misunderstandings about several provisions in the Act. After learning more about the Act, I hope Americans can separate myth from reality. Since the Patriot Act was signed into law, federal investigators have disrupted terror cells in at least 6 American cities, and the Department of Justice has charged over 300 persons in terrorism-related investigations. So far, more than half of those individuals have been convicted or pled guilty. The government's success in preventing another catastrophic attack on the American homeland since September 11th would have been much more difficult, if not impossible, without the Patriot Act. Okay? So, since the Patriot Act was signed into law, this is going to be your answer for number 2. It's in here somewhere, however you want to word it, or you can go down to this one. The government's success. Government has had success. Okay? I'm looking for an answer for number 1. What is the purpose of the USA Patriot Act? Congress passed it. It gives the numbers. Many tools of the Act provide law enforcement to fight. Tools of the Act provides to law enforcement to fight. It's written very strangely. To fight terrorism, have been used for decades to fight organized crime. It has been reviewed and approved. Patriot Act largely. How about this right here? There we go. Sometimes it's not as easy to pull it out, but here it's okay. It's not too bad. Okay? All right. So our answer for number 1 is right there. I'm going to go with this right here. I was thinking up here, law enforcement to fight organized crime and drug dealers, but that's not actually telling you what the purpose of the Patriot Act was. It's just telling you about it. Most of the things that it gives law enforcement have already been used to fight organized crime. Then it goes into what it does. This is it right here. Okay? I need a pen anyway, so let me click on my pen so I can put a star there. Okay, so this will be number 1, and number 2 is going to be down here. Okay, so what was the purpose of the USA Patriot Act? It applies current law to crimes of terrorism. It applies current law to acts of, oops, one second to get that out of the way, ooh, that is messy, terrorism, okay. I actually wrote terrorism, but it kind of blended together, so let me get rid of that, and I will write it better than that. Terrorism, okay? It applies current laws to acts of terrorism. Okay, if you didn't know what the Patriot Act was, it actually tells you exactly what it was in here. Then that's perfect, because then you can use it to write your essay. You can use any information they give you in your DBQs to help you, and any external information you can remember once you've had a reminder from your DBQs, okay? Makes it super easy. In 2004, what was one reason Congressman Lamar Smith believed the USA Patriot Act had been successful? Well, this was from 2004, so this is a current question going along with this DBQ, okay? Or this document, rather. What was one reason he believed the USA Patriot Act had been successful? Well, it's right here. The government's success in preventing would have been much more difficult. Yeah, this could be okay, but it's kind of weak. I think it's going to be in this paragraph right here. Since the Patriot Act was signed into law, federal investigators have disrupted terror cells in at least 6 American cities. How about that? Federal investigators That's an I. That's an S. Oh my goodness. Real rough today. Had disrupted terror cells. Terror cells? Is that what it said? Yep. In at least 6 American cities. I write very big, especially on this thing. Cities. Period. Now, did they give you more than one reason? Sure. 6 American cities, Department of Justice, charged over 300 persons. You could write that. So far, half those individuals have been convicted and pled guilty. You could write that. Although it's not a complete sentence. It's only asking for one reason. Don't give them more than they're asking for. When they're asking for one, that's all we can grade. You're only going to get 1 point on each of these. Score is going to be 1 and 1, okay? You can only get 1 and they're only asking for 1, so only give them 1. Don't stress yourself out looking for 15 answers in there, okay? 1 answer, that's all you give them. Okay, moving on. 9A. Wow, that's a big one. All right, let's see. Where's the question? Let's see. We're on page 24. So we are on 9A and they must have moved it over. Yep. 9A and 9B. Oh, 9B is, looks like a notice in a public library. Okay. Okay, so it gives us 2 questions that go along with the 2 documents. Okay. So, but we're going to flip back and forth, which I hate. I hope for the people who actually took this exam. I think this was 2015. Yep, January 15 this exam was from. I hope these were pages facing each other so that they didn't have to flip back and forth, because that's just annoying. Based on these documents, what are 2 reasons for the opposition of the USA Patriot Act? So why were people against the USA Patriot Act? Okay, so let's look at 9A first. We're looking for 2 reasons people were against the USA Patriot Act. And what did I forget to do? Forgot to circle my source. I didn't read the question first, but I did read the question first, so that's nice. Teachers can be trained too. Here's our source. The source is Jasper County, Indiana Public Library, January 12th, 2011. And our source for this big blurb of text, Eric Lichtbau. Coalition forms to oppose parts of the anti-terrorism law from the New York Times, March 23rd, 2005. This was written 2005, 4 years after the USA Patriot Act was put into effect. If these were not in order, I would write a B next to this, so I remembered it was about Bush. If I was writing about Bush, I wouldn't want to use parts of this to write about Lincoln, because that wouldn't make any sense, okay? So, document 9A, we're looking for 2 reasons people opposed, or 2 reasons for opposition to the USA Patriot Act. Why were people opposed to it? Washington, March 22nd, battle lines were drawn Tuesday in a debate over the government's counterterrorism powers as an unlikely coalition of liberal civil rights advocates, conservative libertarians, gun rights supporters, and medical privacy advocates voiced their objections to crucial parts of the law that expanded those powers after the attack of September 11, 2001. Why were people opposed to it? Doesn't say. It just says they were. right? They voiced their objections over crucial parts of the law that expanded those powers, okay? Keeping the law intact will do great and irreparable harm to the Constitution by allowing the government to investigate people's reading habits, search their homes without notice, and pry into their personal lives. Look at that. They just gave us our answer right out there in the open. Said Bob Barr, a former Republican congressman who is leading the coalition. Mr. Barr voted for the law known as the USA Patriot Act in the House just weeks after the September 11th attacks, but has become one of its leading critics, a shift that reflects the growing unease among some conservative libertarians over the expansion of the government's powers in fighting terrorism. He joined with other conservatives as well as the American Civil Liberties Union on Tuesday in announcing the creation of the coalition, with hopes to curtail some of the law's more sweeping law enforcement provisions. The coalition of liberals and conservatives said it has no quarrel with the majority of the expanded counterterrorism tools that the law provided, some of which amounted to modest upgrades in the government's ability to use modern technology in wiretapping phone calls and the like. It's kind of interesting. You could use this if you were writing about Bush and the USA Patriot Act. That would be really good for your essay. Okay? The USA Patriot Act expanded counterterrorism tools that the law provided, and you could cite that in document 9A, but we're going to go into that later on. But I think that's a really good thing to quote there, okay? But the group said it would focus its effort on urging Congress to scale back 3 provisions of the law that let federal agents conduct sneak and peek searches of a home or business without immediately notifying the subject of such searches, demand records from institutions like libraries and medical offices, and use a broad definition of terrorism in pursuing suspects. I have my 2 answers, but I'm going to look at the second one just because they gave me document 9B. It must be important. Okay, so let's take a look at it. The Jasper County Public Library, a warning from your library. Although the Jasper County Public Library makes every effort to protect your privacy under the USA Patriot Act, Public Law 107-56, records of all materials you borrow from this library may be obtained by federal agents, and your internet use could be monitored. This federal law prohibits library staff from informing you if federal agents have obtained records about you. Kind of scary. Okay? All right. So we're looking for 2 reasons that I'm going to word it the way it's worded here. Based on these documents, what are 2 reasons for opposition to the USA Patriot Act? I found more than 2. I'm sure you probably have as well. Okay? 2 reasons. My nose is running. I'm sorry. I keep sniffling. Okay. I would say one of them is that, how about we use this one? Okay, we'll use both of our federal agents. Oops. We're allowed. Oh, you know what? I don't like the way I'm writing that. I don't like that. How about, because we're talking about the USA Patriot Act, so it, or you could say the USA Patriot Act allowed federal agents to obtain records of people's reading history, I would write more in there, but I can actually split that up into 2, right? Let's take a look down here. How about this? It let federal agents conduct sneak and peek searches of homes without immediately notifying the subject of the searches, demand records from institutions like libraries and medical offices. Okay, so we just did that. You can actually expand that one because that's in one sentence there. We can actually write that. Of people's reading history. Internet. Oops. Wow. I am a mess today with this writing. How about we do internet history? You can leave reading history because they can get copies of anything, really. People's internet searches and medical records. RECORDS, records. And what else could it do? Allows federal agents. It allowed, actually I shouldn't be writing allowed, I should be writing allows because this is still in effect. Federal agents to conduct sneak and peek searches of people's houses and businesses. Okay, that sounds like 2 reasons to be opposed to it to me. Okay, if you don't like what I wrote here, you can use one thing. I would see it's only asking for 2 reasons. So if you wrote it allows them to obtain records of people's internet searches, period, that would be fine. No big deal. You'd still get a point for that. Okay. If you wanted to write down, it gave a very broad definition of terrorism and pursuing suspects. You could write that. I don't know. There's a bunch of things you could write in here, right? Laws more sweeping law enforcement provisions. I mean, there's a few things you could use in here. And the things that you can't use, you might be able to use in your essay anyway. So as you're going through your documents, maybe like this other one where I was starring it and going, hey, that's a pretty cool thing, right? Oh, look at this right here. Oh, that's pretty cool. You might be able to cite that on your essay. In document 1, it states quotation marks. Tell them what it says. Copy it directly from the document, okay? Or you say, if it goes into your sentence, blah, 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 and then in parentheses, document 9, or document 9A, okay? If you are writing your essay and you completely forget to cite them, you can go back and just put it over to the side. Document 4. I did read it. It was from document 4, okay? All right, so another 30 minutes on these. We are done with our documents, right? That's 12 points worth of documents. We're going to go into our essay next, and that's it for DBQs. Thanks.